passage I'd like to share with you today that is in no part inspired by my very good friend Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Just as Pastor Jaime has his good friend C.S. Lewis and Mr. John Stott, I have mine. Dietrich Bonhoeffer wrote a book called The Cost of Discipleship, which is a fantastic read and well worth your time if you should choose to seek it out. And in it, he discusses the idea of a costly grace. So often today, we treat grace as if it was cheap, as if it came cheap, because we've always had grace. We've always had it there. We've always had the unlimited pouring out of grace that Christ offers. And we sometimes don't see the value in what it took for that grace to be offered onto us. So by Dietrich Bonhoeffer's definition of cheap grace, I love it. Cheap grace means the justification of sin without the justification of the sinner. Grace alone does anything they say, and so everything remains as it was before. In our modern context, as we talk about cheap grace, we look at people that they're like, oh, I have a struggle, or I have a thing, or there's even whole books dedicated called Messy Christianity, or a podcast called Bad Christian, where they take this idea of God's grace and just paint it as a band-aid over anything, or a credit card without a limit, and they just throw it down and go, all right, that sin is paid, that thing is paid, and I don't have to then, there's no cost there, there's no anything, it's just, it's there, it's unlimited, it's free, good, let's throw it down. And don't get me wrong, grace is unlimited, grace is given freely, but that doesn't mean that there's not a cost that comes along with it. We so often take it for granted that I think we lose often perspective as to what grace really is and how and why it is offered. So when we look at Peter, I'm reading from ESV, Matthew 4:18. While walking by the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, who was also called Peter, and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea. For they were fishermen, and he said to them, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. Immediately they left their nets and followed him. And going on from there, he saw two other brothers, James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, in the boat with Zebedee their father, mending their nets, and he called them. Immediately they left their boat and their father and followed him. These men are picking up their entire lives in order to follow the pursuit of grace and discipleship in Christ. And that's truly what grace is discipleship in Christ. And this idea of our faith without works being dead, these things, grace has a cost in our lives. And as much as Christ's yoke is light and easy, and we love to quote that because it's so wonderful and fun, there is still a yoke there to be borne. Now it is nothing, because grace cost God his son. It cost him bearing every temptation. It cost him pain like none of us have ever felt. And it actually cost him God turning his back on him. And we must see the value in that cost and allow that to be reflected in our lives. And then to quote Dietrich Bonhoeffer again, costly grace is the gospel which must be sought again and again, the gift of which must be asked for, the door at which we must knock. Such grace is costly because it calls us to follow, and it is grace because it calls us to follow Jesus Christ. So I ask you this day, this next time you come across something that it's so easy to throw the grace card on and just go, all right, I'll work on this later. All right, I will pray for forgiveness for this later, or I'll whatever. I will just simply brush this off because God accepts me because of this little defect of my personality. No, stop and understand. Yes, God offers grace, but you must also accept the cost that comes with grace. So I'm reading this as much for you as I am for, anyone else, in that I must stand up and I must accept the cost of grace and pick up and drop my nets. Actually, not pick up my nets, drop my nets and follow Christ. For he offers grace, but I must accept the cost that Christ puts on it, which is dedication of my life unto him. And I know that's not easy, but that's the cost. So I thank you for your time. Have a good one.